Let's bring the flamethrower of truth to the Democratic Party. Truth that they react to as a vampire does garlic. Look, I'm done, D-O-N-E, done with the blue team's lies, their hypocrisy, and their sanctimonious, holier-than-thou attitude. Guys, as we begin, please thumb up the video. It costs you nothing. Do it for the algorithm. Just thumb it up. Leave me a comment with your thoughts. And if you're new and you like the content, subscribe. Me, personally, I'm cheering for the whole DNC to get a one-way ticket to a North Korean gulag. The good news of sending them there is that there usually is not a round trip. Background here. Look, I'm not some lifelong MAGA maniac. I grew up Democrat. When the party, in fairness, stood for something completely different than it does today. I was a center-left kid raised in a family so left-tilted, they'd call me a Republican for stating the rich guy at the end of the block paid more in taxes than my parents. I grew up in a house where Bush lied, people died was practically a bedtime story. The Iraq War, I was screaming,
"No! God, please, no! No! No!"
in 2003, while the Uniparty, both blue and red, sold us that dumpster fire like it was a timeshare in Fallujah. And personally, I met soldiers who came back broken and haunted and spoke of and described the horrors that they witnessed that they did not sign up for. And the worst part is that I'm 99.8% sure the intelligence, in quotes, wasn't wrong. It was a lie. A big, fat, treasonous lie that deserves a noose for the liars on both sides of the aisle that perpetrated it. Blood, treasure, lives gone. Poof. For nothing. And the Democrats, they were in on it with the Republicans, grinning like used car salesmen at a foreclosure auction. Fast forward to Obama, the hope and change candidate, Messiah. And I was all in for him, especially the first term, until he wasn't. Why? Well, in part because I saw racial tensions increasing, not getting better. My whole basketball crew, guys that I'd hooped with for years, started hitting me for the first time ever with race lectures like I was their personal Oprah audience. It broke my gosh darn heart, honestly. And the sad part is, for me, I still voted for him again in 2012, but barely. My loyalty was wobbling like a Jenga tower in a windstorm. Then Donald Trump struts in off of the escalator, a human wrecking ball in a red tie, climbing out of the political swamp using Rosie O'Donnell as a stepladder.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't.
I wasn't ready to plant a Trump flag in my yard. I actually would have voted Libertarian in 2016 if I wasn't out of the country. But like many people, I was intrigued by the guy. I mean, he beat all the odds, and who doesn't like a story like that? And the Democrats, in turn, lost their gosh darn minds. The media, they went full telenovela. Trump's a racist. He called Nazis very fine people. Except he didn't. He condemned them loud and clearly.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
But the media, the Democrats, are like, who you gonna believe? Us or your lying eyes? I've got a two-lie rule with friends. Lie to me once, I call you out. Don't let it happen again. Lie twice, you're demoted to an acquaintance. The Democrats, they're on lie number 1,147. And they've been unfriended forever. The media's bias, it was so blatant, it was like watching a magician botch the same trick every single day. You catch on. Just as an example, Glenn Kessler, the fact checker for the Washington Post, was on with Mark Halperin, and I made a video about this where they were discussing media bias, and Kessler was denying it because his legacy depended on it. Halperin could have used the time when Trump's team took out ISIS boss Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and the WashPo's headline was "Austere Religious Scholar Dies at 48." This is how they are framing the end of a terrorist, of the most murderous person on the planet that would subjugate every single one of us to his brand of radical Islam, believing that he was doing the world a favor. And this is the Washington Post reporting on it during Trump's term. Are you kidding me? You know what it's like? It's like calling Jeffrey Dahmer a creative chef with boundary issues. They couldn't even give Donald Trump a high five for making the world safer. Instead, what they did was double down on the Russia coup. Not a hoax, by the way. It was a coup. That's the proper way to frame it. They went all in on that. They wanted him gone. They tried to use the 25th Amendment, but they realized they did not have as much of his cabinet that would vote on it. Then they went to impeachment, whatever it took. Why? Because he was upsetting the apple cart, because he dared to talk peace with Russia. And you can't have that when you're trying to reboot the Cold War for ratings and military spending. That goes with it as the spoils of having a permanent enemy. And by the way, speaking of impeachment, let's talk about the quid pro quo clown show. Biden was out there bragging about getting the Ukrainian prosecuted fired on video in exchange for $1 billion.
So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Why? I mean, at least it was in part to protect his kid's shady as hell Burisma gig. But when Trump is accused of a quid pro quo, it's impeachment o'clock, ding ding. Meanwhile, the Democrats were pulling every dirty trick to kneecap his presidency. And then they caught a break. 2020 hit. And oh my goodness, COVID. They unleashed that upon us. Lockdowns crushed family businesses. They masked children. While Nancy Pelosi was out getting her hair did, and Gavin Newsom wined and dined at the French Laundry mask-free like a Roman emperor at an orgy. Rules for thee, but not for me. Why? Why did they behave in this manner? Because they didn't believe their own COVID nonsense. It was a means of control. You know how you know? Because otherwise they wouldn't have all gone out together in the eye of Hurricane 19, sipping $500 bottles of wine together. They sold us a lie, an utter lie, whose function they used to control us. And don't get me started on the BLM riots that they encouraged. Kamala Harris and her pals cheered on the chaos. They bailed out looters in Minnesota while it was still burning. And these aren't people that are sitting on the sideline merely watching. These are those who did enough to warrant arrest. And they did this while looping the George Floyd video over and over again like it was the top Netflix special ever made. And they ignored the part where he resisted and begged to be put on the ground. Don Lemon and the whole mainstream, rather the corporate media, was preaching about systemic racism in order to foment unrest in our nation, to get Donald Trump out of office. It was a color revolution. The only systemic thing here is they're lying, laundering them through social media, via censorship, via the destruction of our First Amendment.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Via the media reporting on it with the framing that helps the DNC overthrow Donald Trump, they had the audacity to call those riots mostly peaceful, while your business went up in flames. They're liars. They are evil liars. Then you can point to the Hunter Biden laptop. They claimed it was Russian disinformation. 51 former intelligence officers claimed it to be. They said it had all the hallmarks. Weasel words. Big Tech censored the New York Post and the story faster than you can say corruption cover-up, because that's what they were instructed to do by the liars. The FBI absolutely knew that that laptop was real. Glenn Greenwald was able to fact check whether or not the laptop was genuine or not. Meanwhile, you had 60 Minutes claiming that it was unsure, that Donald Trump was the liar. That laptop was a gold mine of Biden family grift, but they buried it to steal the election. Why? Because they are power hungry and evil liars. Then there's January 6th, that which they no doubt helped precipitate with the QAnon psyop that I believe that they perpetrated on the American public, riling everybody up, getting them to gather all in one place. They called it an insurrection.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
An insurrection, huh? Where nobody brought a gun, just a dude walking around in a Viking hat, taking selfies, leading a prayer in the Senate chambers. When Trump asked for extra National Guard, he got rejected. I wonder why. They didn't like the optics, or they were hoping that this would take place. Either way, you, DNC, were lying. They lied, for example, about Officer Brian Sicknick, saying that on January 6th he was bashed over the head with a fire extinguisher, from which injuries he perished. But in fact, it was a stroke several days later. Liars. And they brought that up during the second impeachment and over again since on national TV, because they are able to hide the truth from most people and get away with it. Because they control the narrative. Because they are liars and they coerce and bribe people through the printed money to get their way. Then they debanked Donald Trump, his children, even Melania. Not to mention other conservatives who couldn't fight back with the same platform like they could. Crypto companies, Mark Andreessen brought this up on an episode of Joe Rogan. Elizabeth Warren and company, working on behalf of the Blue Cabal, debanked you. And your work and investment were decapitated, and that went for banks that were serving the crypto community. And it wasn't only banks. Airbnb went woke. They banned conservatives as well, even if you were merely associated with conservatives. For example, they didn't stop at firebrand Lauren Southern for her views. And by the way, I vehemently object to Airbnb doing this, and it's why we don't have the same relationship that we did 10 years ago when I first joined up with them, when I used to promote them. But they also banned Lauren Southern's parents for their daughter's politics. Do you think that that's democracy? Do you think that this is honest? No, what this is a 1984-like authoritarian regime, as though we were frickin' Canada. And let's talk about Leticia James. Oh, this fat queen of hypocrisy tried to bankrupt Trump.
Donald Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud,
Claiming that Mar-a-Lago was worth a paltry $18 million. $18 million in Palm Beach. I'd pay that for the guest bathroom and flip it for $200 million the next day. Mar-a-Lago is 17 acres. 17 acres. A 1 acre lot in the area goes for $18 million. 17. She's a liar.
Today, we will prove our other claims.
Putting on the clothes of a preacher and telling you that she's doing this for the common public good. Meanwhile, that hypocrite Leticia has got her own fraud rap sheet, lying about her marriage, which was to her father, she told the bank, for better interest rates, as well as various property details as well. For example, having 2 principal residences while she's the New York State Attorney General, and her other residence was in Virginia. Now she's facing a grand jury.
No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
Karma's got better aim than a sniper at a Trump rally. Speaking of which, these evildoers called him Hitler so many times, it's a miracle they didn't hire the assassins themselves, which I still think is a possibility. And this happened not once, no, but twice. And the Biden regime was criminally negligent in providing him protection. And when that failed, when he turned his head at the last second, well, we'll just slap 34 felonies for a hush money payment case that is an expired misdemeanor. Liars, 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 everywhere. Blue. And the Democrats scream about democracy. They're ruining democracy while robbing Bernie Sanders twice and installing then the third time Kamala, a word salad generating machine who makes Biden look like Martin Luther King Jr. in the eloquence department. They're not the party of the people. They're the party of the grift, the lie, and the unmasked elite. Adam Schiff leaking classified info like it's a Reddit thread. Hillary's email server getting a DOJ hall pass. Entrapping General Michael Flynn. These people are a walking crime spree, and I am done. I used to wear blue with pride. Now the thought of it makes me gag, and I mean that literally. These evil people shut down businesses. They masked kids. They purged the military of 3 thinkers for failing to agree to take a non-functional vaccine that they sold to us. They censored my speech and tried to jail and kill their enemies while dining out mask-free, creating a panic over something that they did not believe in. Or else, once again, why would they have gone out without masks? So you wonder why I cheer on the grand juries and feel personally filled with glee every time I hear one announced that these liars will be prosecuted. But let me be clear about one very important thing. I don't want them in an American prison. I want them in a North Korean labor camp, learning the true meaning of progressive, a socialist utopia for them. So goodness gracious, let's burn down the DNC. Bring forth the corruptors, the liars, the grifters, Those who gave $2 billion of our taxpayer dollars to the NGO of Stacey Abrams right before Joe Biden left office. Stacey Abrams, whom the Washington Post referred to as a supermodel. And they want us to trust their reporting. Those who incited the 2020 riots.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
Bailed out the miscreants who were destroying civilization, those who preached division for their own gain, and helped precipitate the war in Ukraine with their Russia coup lies. Ship them all to Kim Jong-un's labor camp and BLM-style burn down the DNC. I'll be there celebrating in the warmth and glow of the flames. You bring a couple of sticks and I'll bring the marshmallows.